Hi, Rose. Thank you for joining me on the I Am Unbreakable podcast. So excited to have you as the guest.
Thank you so much, Adrienne, for the opportunity to be here today.
Aw, you know what? You are the epitome of a rock star woman. When I look at you and all the things you've done, I just, bow down and say, wow, love, love, love what you have done. I'm wondering how you do it all. How have you done it all?
Part of it is blind faith. Part of
Love
it
that.
is sheer ignorance of not really caring but trying it anyway. Part of it is being curious, and part of it is I get bored very quickly. So how do I do it all? I do it out of partially necessity, partially out of boredom, partially out of curiosity, partially with wanting to leave an impact somehow, somewhere at the end of my journey. And so,
Part of
I
your
do a little bit of
legacy.
this. Part of my legacy, and ideally what I'd like my legacy to be is to impact people in a way that they will continue to flourish, or maybe give them a tidbit of information to make their life easier, or to prove to them that you know uh, a person like myself who wasn't born with affluence at all. My parents were immigrants to Canada. My dad came in 1955. My brother and my mother came in 1957. We were quite poor,
Where
and
were
we
you from? Where's
um,
your background?
where were my parents from? My parents were from the former Yugoslavia, and a region called Slovenia. And so, yeah, my dad escaped in the Alps on Valentine's Day in 1955, and yeah, the
Love
rest is
that.
history.
I love
Yeah,
that. Yeah, because
so
my parents came in 56 as well. And I always tell the story. My mother came with she was on the Olympic swim team with nothing but a backpack. And,
yeah,
granted, the last 5, 6 years have not been easy for the world, but I wonder how they did it. That is where I think you and I have learned resilience and a good work
absolutely.
ethic. And you
Yeah,
talk about leaving a legacy uh, of something to me that sort of models leadership, mentorship. And you have always shown the side that I know of you, have always shown that side of yourself that wants to give and wants to see people grow and learn. And you don't keep things close to your chest. You're like, you know what? I tried this and it worked for me. It may or may not work for you. However, let me share, which is such a beautiful quality to have, Rose.
thank you. Thank you. It comes naturally. I think, if I look back at it, my DNA comes from both my parents, and my parents were very giving souls. They were very faithful people. They believed in God. They believed in sharing. They believed in community. And, when you're raised in that environment, you innately choose to do that because you see how the community flourishes, and community can be all sorts of different things to different people. But when you give more than you take, ultimately I think you leave the world a better place. And I hope that at the end of my journey, that will be the case. And I think it's really important as we get older. We've gained so much knowledge, so much experience about what to do, and heaven forbid, but what not to do, that it's really important to just say, you know what, you may want to consider this, and you may want to consider that, or you may want to consider that, just because it may pave your road a little bit easier than perhaps what I experienced or what I've observed with others. So I think it's
Love
really
that.
important when you have that knowledge to be able to share it. Choose a platform. Maybe it's one-on-one, maybe it's via a podcast, maybe it's through writing. It can be very different means, and everybody has a gift or a set of gifts that they have that they can give. And I think as you give of yourself, you experience more joy as well. And I mean, whether it's your children, or whether it's a mentee, or a person that you coach, or a coworker, or somebody who reports to you, whatever the relationship is, being able to give allows the other person to be able to experience something that they may not have had an opportunity to do without you. So, why not take that risk? Why not share?
I love that. But if everybody was like you, I think the world would be a much better place. And, part of what our mission and why our missions are aligned is that is the whole premise of the podcast and of the magazine. And I know one of the main reasons you and I reconnected. But your gift is that of such empathy and such, there's just, you're very authentic. And that is a very rare, believe it or not, I'm sure you know, because you are in the business world, a very rare commodity. And so you and I talked a little bit earlier about the boardroom and how it looks. And you know my story, and I'm in a very male predominant industry, and first Canadian female to own a private investigation and security agency. I didn't even know that until, I don't know, 12 years in, and somebody said, "Oh, you should have an award because you're the," and I'm like, "Really? I didn't even know that." Because my sort of thought process is, I don't look, and I never have, and thank God for my dad who's always cheered me on when he was here, is that you just do what you're passionate about and you do what you love, regardless of gender and regardless of obstacles. And I will say that, until my journey here is done, as I think you will as well. And so I think you are encouraging not only the up and coming generation, but I feel that people can really relate to you that are like minded, similar age, possibly older, but also that are in businesses, but are also transitioning, right?
Mhm.
And
Very
transitioning
much so.
into another thing that they love, because one thing I love about you, I cannot keep up with all the things you do. I thought I was a busy person. However, I'm just going to say you're constantly juggling things. And I wonder if that's just sort of your magic, where you can juggle things and you can contribute. I think that's where you find your passion, is how much and how many lives can I affect? Do you think I'm right?
Part of it is that, yes, I think it's definitely that. I think also, I mean, 4 years ago, I chose to retire from being affiliated in a full-time role. I was a CEO of a company called Ag Energy Cooperative, and it served the agricultural industry in Ontario with energy, so natural gas and electricity. And it was a great experience. But I had married the love of my life, and he was in Ottawa, I was in Burlington, and it came down to, okay, so where are we going to live? And so I figured that I had the more flexibility, and I talked to my board. I thought with the internet, with technology, that I'd be able to do the commute, because I had been doing a commute for 4 years back and forth between Burlington and Ottawa, or my husband would come and visit in Burlington, vice versa. So anyway, I got tired of the commute, and I said to my board, look, would you be open to, me having an extra day in Ottawa or an extra 2 days every week? And they weren't open to it, because I think they were older school. And so from that perspective, it was a little bit challenging. So I chose me at that time, and I figured, okay, well, that's fine. I'm going to lean more into board work and into consulting.
I
And so
love that. I'm going to stop you there. So anybody that's just tuned in or has been watching, the fact that you said that, I think we're going to get t-shirts made, by the way, because we will have merchandise. I chose me. I chose me. I think a lot of women don't choose themselves. And the more women I talk to, whether you're a young mother, whether you're childless, whether your baby is your business or your fur baby, whatever the case is, as women, and I think our upbringings were similar, we're very much people pleasers, and we're caretakers and
absolutely.
look after everybody. I chose me. I love that. I think that's going to be the name of the podcast.
There
That
you
those small words put in a phrase are so powerful, Rose. Was that
They
a hard
are.
decision for you though?
Um, you know, when you've gone through your life searching for the right individual to walk alongside with you, and you finally meet them, everything else kind of falls away. I've served on boards before, and paid board positions, and I was a CEO. I was a chief marketing officer for two very large Fortune 100 companies. I did a lot of things. I've been very fortunate. Part of it, as I mentioned earlier, is that blind faith, and the other one is okay, well, you know what, I'm going to try this, because until I'm told that I can't, I think I can. And so, there comes times where you look at your life and you say, wow, I have this magnificent gift in front of me, and it's my husband. And I've had these opportunities several times in my life. Magnificent gift is giving birth to a son and having a great relationship there, having two great parents. A lot of it is about people. And people also create opportunities for us. They help develop us. And there comes a time where you say, okay, am I going to continue in the hamster wheel and, commute, every, Sunday night or Monday morning, commute either Thursday night or Friday night, and go back and forth,
The
uh,
5.5 hour drive, you get stuck in weather or
or you
traffic,
fly, right?
plus
Either
tax.
way,
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
it's a lot,
I'm just
and
saying
so,
it's a full day that you could be, with your loved ones. But
yeah.
another thing I'm really hearing from you, and I'm drawing from your very positive energy, is that it is about relationships. It's about humans. It's not about, well, I've got this 6-figure job and I've got this outstanding opportunity and I've got this beautiful title and a beautiful home. And it's not that, I choose a man or I choose a relationship. It's I choose me and I choose more peace. And you were willing to stay on, but you just needed a little bit of flexibility and you didn't get
Yeah.
it.
Well,
You,
they just weren't ready. And then lo and behold, the year later, COVID hit, right? So they had
right?
to. But you know what? Things always happen for a reason. Um,
100%.
the person who replaced me is a great leader, so she's doing really, really well, and the company, it was just not time. Where 6 months later, 9 months later, it was time. But that's okay, because it forced me to grow more as well. And so, I had opportunities to do consulting. I had opportunities to go on to additional boards, to learn new things, to do coaching and mentor additional people, and to just work in my garden, and to take off with my husband on a vacation, or to visit my son, or like whatever it is. It gave me the flex that I needed. It doesn't mean that I don't work. It just means I have more flexibility, because it's my life and it's my timetable versus everybody else's.
And I love that. Just exactly what you said when you said, it gave me time to garden. And, I'm sort of in the stage, as you and I spoke of, where I've made the decision that I am going forward with doing what I'm doing. And it is leaving something that I've loved and, created for the last over 2 decades. And it's not an easy decision to make, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're a C-suite exec. It really, to me, does not matter. But it all goes back to you choosing you're choosing yourself, but you're also choosing inner peace. I know that last weekend we went on a bike ride and it was the most ridiculous thing. I can't remember when the last time, and I got taken on a BMX trail, hence the blown out disc, but that's a whole nother story for some other time, why I'm kind of fidgety in my chair. But it makes me realize, when you're in nature, like you're gardening and you're taking that bike ride, geez, how many bike rides did I miss because
Exactly.
I was doing whatever? And not that, look, if you ask my kids, they're probably like, oh, please go on vacation. You're around too much, or whatever the case may be. But I'm kidding. But they're lovely. I'm kidding. They actually are. They're nice kids. And I say kids, they're young men. But I feel that for the first sort of half of our lives, assuming we're all going to live to 100, is, we do spend a lot of time while being a kid, and then either creating your professional and personal life, having kids and whatever. And there comes a point in time where our parents weren't like that. It was, freedom 65 if they were lucky, right? Not even 55. And I think for us, we I think it's almost like maybe you learned this from your son and you can share this with me as well, is the generation that is up and coming are so much more relaxed and chilled than I think we were. And that's one
Yeah.
thing my kids taught me. A lot of times they're like, Mom, chill. And I'm like, how am I going to chill? And I've got this and I've got that. And, and I'm always running around and you've got hockey and you've got, and then you just, at one point, like you said, that hamster wheel, you just say, I'm dizzy, I'm tired, I'm done. Right.
Yeah. And it's
And
time
that
to just
was
pivot.
your yeah, and that was your time where it's like, I'm not leaving, and so where I was going with all this before I got stuck onto the BMX path is, you had said something that to me was very interesting, and I just was wondering if you could sort of expand on that. You said that you weren't retiring or anything, and it's almost like I feel as women, if we do choose to retire early, we have to say, "I'm retiring, I'm not stopping work." And I feel like a
Yeah.
lot
Well,
of my
there is that
community is like that.
expectation. Yeah, there is that expectation. And I mean, I retired from being a full-time CEO and having full-time accountabilities, plus all the other little things that I was doing. And I just wanted to have a bit of a break and to also just lean into the things that I was more interested in. I had my role for 9 years. In 9 years, being in the same role, I mean, it expanded, it contracted, it morphed into different things. So it was always interesting, but it was just time, and it was time to develop the next leader. And so I did that, and I could gracefully leave. And I was happy with that. And I was happy with the fact that I had a little bit of breathing room, because for a good chunk of my life prior to that, I worked and I worked and I worked and I worked. And I'm a type A for sure. There's no doubt about it. And so
I know
from
how
that
so well.
perspective, and I'm committed. So if I give my word that I'm going to show up, I will show up. If there's a snowstorm, unless it's really, really treacherous out, I will be there. And so I just found that I was giving so much of myself, and I was just tired. And
Yeah.
so I just thought, you know what? It was time.
So, and you know, this will definitely be a podcast, part two, but I feel as women, the kind of the burnout that we experience, I don't know that our male counterparts maybe do as much. And a lot of ours, like, and I'm talking for me, so I won't speak for all the other women, but the conversations we've had, I know a lot feel the same way, is we don't feel that we can give to ourselves as much as we can to other people. And a perfect example, a gal that I was talking to, a very, anyway, somebody I really respect, and she's a doctor. Nevertheless, she said, Adrian, she goes, it's kind of like, when you're on an airplane and you're about to take off and they talk about the oxygen mask and if you're traveling with little ones. And I'm like, yeah, that is so annoying. I would absolutely never put my mask on first. I'd always go on to the kids. And that was my aha moment, where she's like, and that's what your problem is. If you're not good, they're not going to be good. And you can't
That's
help them. And I
absolutely
was
true.
like, okay, well, like when you put it like that, it makes so much sense. Like now I understand, but you need that sometimes, somebody to say, you need an oxygen mask at some point, you're going to burn out. And I think as women, we so take that and feel like either we failed somehow, I can't be a rock star entrepreneur or professional or CEO and be, that mom, or be, that board member. And we feel like we can do it all until we just feel like we can't and we need a break. And kudos to you for knowing that you needed that. How do we encourage, or how can you encourage other women that are probably watching this going on, in tears? Because I often, do that, where I'll watch, other women where they are where you want to be. And I don't cry like, oh, I want that, but it's just, I'm celebrating their bravery and their resilience. What can you say to somebody that's watching this podcast that's going through that and is terrified? There's the financial, there's telling her partner, there's feeling like she's failed, worrying about, the finances for the family. What would you say to that person?
Start small. right? Start small. Start with saying, no, thank you. No, I cannot. No, I can't do that for you. However, here's another alternative. It starts with simply starting to shrink your domain of responsibilities. If you start saying no, and you feel very empowered to be able to say no, it multiplies in the sense of one no leads to another no, which leads to another no, which then gives you greater focus for you. So it can start off with no. It can start off with taking your vacation,
Uh,
right? Like, take your vacation. If you have 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, take it. Don't be the lamb that follows and does not enjoy the benefit that you're given. Take the time to restore, take the time to relax. Have a hard cutoff time as to when you're going to be looking at your emails or your phone, and just put it away.
That
Put
is,
time
that
into
is
nature.
That is huge. That is
Yeah.
huge. I mean, it was for me. I struggled with that for a very long time. Not only like everything you said, start off small, take your vacation, and putting away your phone and your work emails, because I know for me, just the business I'm in, it's 24/7, 365, and I had a hard time detaching. I mean, lots of times I'd be, at hockey tournaments, or I would be at home and I would still be connected. I remember one hockey team, and I still to this day love the gals that are on there. All the moms went away to a spa weekend except for me, because I felt like I couldn't. And this was many years ago, but I felt like I had to, throw myself on the cross and sort of, like you said, be that lamb and say, like, no, I have to say no to certain things. And women have a really tough time saying no. So I'm going to just add into what you said, if you don't mind, and say,
Not at all.
not only like, because some people just can't say no, they feel guilty, we feel bad, I'm sorry, I can't, you know we can also say not now, or
Yes.
no thank you, or perhaps at a later date. And if they start to push you and pressure you, then you can say, I'll contact you, I will let you know, my schedule does not permit me to do this. Because exactly what you were saying, I mean, I was the head of the PTA, I was again, having four boys in hockey, I was the manager, the this, the that, plus running a business, plus running a household. I don't even know, when people say to me, "How did you do it?" I can't even answer you, and I think you're the same. You just did it, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
You
you
just
did.
did it.
I mean,
But
I was fortunate. I had lots of support when my son was growing up, and I was divorced from my first husband. My son was about three and a half when we split, and in that period of time, my parents were very close to me. They were able to help out. So I
that
had
is lovely.
trusted people that I knew could take care of my son if I wasn't there. I had a great ex-husband in the sense of he was totally engaged in my son's life. And
That's
so
wonderful.
I didn't have that fear about, oh, well, what the heck is going to happen to my child because I don't know who's taking care of him. My
Yeah.
parents did a pretty darn good job at raising my brother and I. So they were going to be good with my son. That I knew that was going to be a great
That
outcome.
was Yeah, and that's a savior. I know not everybody has that luxury, I'll be
Yeah,
honest.
no, true.
My mother still lives with me, and having the four boys, I could have never done what I did without my mother. And like you said, I would have never left my children with a stranger. I just would not have
Yeah.
done. So,
And stuff
thank
happens,
you,
right? Like,
moms. Right? Thank you to
yeah,
them, and dad. I mean, my dad never got to meet my kids, but, at the end of the day, I'm sure he was with us in spirit and always is, but, you had your mom and dad, thank goodness, because I don't know, I still to this day tell my mom, I don't know how I could have ever done it without you. And I think that's a gift that we give them as well. And I'm
yeah.
sorry to ask you this, do you still have your mom and dad?
No, unfortunately, my mother passed away. It'll be roughly 7 years now, and my dad, it's now 12 years. Both of them had cancer.
Sorry.
So I lost them both sort of at 82 and a half. And I was very fortunate to be able to be there for them as they were for me. So, it's just another one of those things that, you have to deal with. That's a hard and fast, yes, you will be there if you have that connection with your family. And so in there again, it's the juggling of the balls. What is going to give? I was very fortunate that both with my dad and with my mom, I was still working at Ag Energy, and I had a wildly supportive board. When they knew that things were very tough, I had a great team that I worked with. The staff there, all the people that I worked with were amazing. I was very forthright with them, very vulnerable to say, look, I have to focus on these bigger things because I just don't know what's going to happen. And they were great. They allowed me to be able to focus on what was really important to me, which was,
That's wonderful.
sort of the last days, if you wish, and to be able to be there for various events. And it was great because in those relationships, and we go back to sort of the common theme about people and connection, when you create those connections, when you get that trust, when you have that bond, whether it's no longer vogue to call your work teammates as family, but I considered the people I work with as my extended family. I was very fortunate. I trusted them. They trusted me. We worked well together. And when anybody had a challenge, we were able to work with the team to be able to manage it. That's not a luxury that a lot of people have. I had the great benefit of having a wonderful family that was supportive. They supported me, even though they didn't know what the heck my journey was going to be, right? Because I reinvented myself so many different times. But they were there, and they were happy to be supportive. They were happy to be there for my son. They were loving, they were engaged, and they were always saying, you know what? Don't worry. Everything's going to be okay.
Watch your
We
back.
believe in you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here we are, we'll keep pushing you along if you need it. But if you need a rest and you need a tea or you need some strudel, here we are. Let's go and sit down. And like we're not infallible. We have challenges, and I would say that the biggest challenges I've ever experienced, yeah, like I've experienced challenges at work, but the ones that have had more impact on me are the personal ones. Going through a divorce, and disrupting a family, that's a challenge. That's a huge challenge. Knowing that your parents are riddled with cancer and they're not going to have much time. That's a huge challenge. And so just dealing with that's always been way more important than work. And I'm not saying that my profession hasn't, or my professional career has not been meaningful to me. It's just, you know what? It's personal, but it's work. My family is wildly personal, and it's me. It's my DNA. It's my soul. It's the people I share my most vulnerable moments with. And so you need to have that in your life to be able to morph and do all the other things. And so, you say the no, you have your backup, you have your emergency backups, when it comes to your children, to healthcare, I mean, a lot of it is planning, ad nauseum to make sure that you have that set up, but also treating people really well, because if you treat people well, they will remember the experience you had with them. And if it's a positive one, the likelihood of getting support in the future, whether you pay for it or not, is irrelevant. You will get it. And so there's so much complexity to the, what are the ingredients of being able to have that time for yourself. But it's a whole host of different things that you can just, put a little bit here and sprinkle it a little bit there, knead well, and work well. It's part of life. And it's just kindness, compassion, support of others, opening up doors for others. All that comes into the magical equation that helps you then in turn be able to have options and be able to take a stop.
And it sounds like what you're saying too is so incredibly important. And I'm with you when it comes to family. That's number one, always has been, always will be. Nothing will come in between that. But you talked about two things. Number one, which I think is so incredibly important, is do it in small bits. That it people think that they need to run a marathon tomorrow if they decide something.
Yeah.
And like you said, it really is about, the way my son had an IEP, and it was about chunking. And it's about little tiny steps that if I owe it, people are always saying, and really well-renowned, amazing people that I love, never look back. Well, I tell my clients, look back only to see how far you've come. If you look back at last week, last month, 6 months, or 12 months ago, look where you are today, right?
Yeah,
And this might have
absolutely.
been your dream, 2 years ago, and look, you're here now. Fine, you want to reinvent yourself, and which is what I want to touch on. You said, oh, I've reinvented myself so many times. I think that's why one of the many reasons you and I get along so well is because people sometimes I won't see them for a while and they're like, so what are you doing? Every time I see you, I'm like, I'm still like, yeah, I'm a serial entrepreneur for sure, but I'm always like doing other things, and you want to grow and you want to learn. And you and I do that so freely and sort of easily, and with ease, and I'll say this, some degree of confidence. I think you and I have a confidence of not necessarily knowing the outcome, not necessarily not scared shitless of, how things are going to turn out if, you're thinking financially and whatnot, or different other things, but we have a confidence in ourselves that we will land on our feet and we're going to make the best of it. We're going to learn, we're
Yeah,
going to grow, we're going to mentor along the way, but we're going to figure it out. Where other
yeah,
people go their whole lives doing the same thing, God bless them, and they're happy. And then as they should stay where they are. But if you get to a point, like you said, where you're burnt out, you're feeling like your heart is, in Ottawa, and, 2 feet are still, in Burlington, it is sometimes choosing yourself. And that is not being selfish. That is
no,
not
I think it's
selfish.
necessary because I mean, if I didn't make that choice, would I still be married right now? Right? I
Oh,
mean,
I think,
it's not sustainable
no.
to commute, a 6 hour distance, because my work was also in Guelph. So I also had an hour commute I had a house in Burlington. So I had the hour commute to Guelph. And so it's just not sustainable. And originally when my husband and I got married, the intention was within that year that I would actually leave and just find something else to do. Well, the problem was we had this issue at work where somebody was sick, and we were a small, tight team, and so we needed to delay that. Then there was another person who had a healthcare issue, so we dealt with that. And then there was something else, and so my son and I went
Putting
to
out
Colombia.
fires.
I kept putting it out to do the right thing, and then my son and I were in Slovenia, and we happened to be in the Alps, and we were sitting out and he was still sleeping, and it was an early morning, and I was having a cup of coffee, and I just looked around and I thought, I want to do more of this.
Yeah.
And so I called my husband up and I said, you know what, I'm going to give my notice when I come into the office, when I come back from my trip. Are you okay with that? And he said, I'm fine with it. I'm happy with that if you're happy. So I came back and I said to my board, okay, that was October. The following April, we'll create the plan. We'll ensure that everything's in place, and we'll continue on. And it was a great way to depart, with being able to sort of pass the baton, work with the people. But like, being a platinum member with WestJet by just doing Toronto to Ottawa is no fun. And so despite the fact that I love WestJet, I didn't love the amount of time I was spending in the airport or commuting. And my life is just so much better by not having to do that. I do that now for joy versus because
Necessity.
I have to.
Yes, yes. And you get to do the travel, and you get to sort of reap the benefits
Mhm.
of your hard work and all your hours and all your effort that you have put in. And I'm not saying everybody has to put in, 10 years, 15 years, 35 or 40 years, but you know, you just sort of know. I think if you listen to your body, I think if you listen to your mind and to your heart, you will know when it's time to transition.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes a lot longer to transition. And so, when you mentioned, what if you have mortgage payments? What if you don't have this? Like when you're a single parent, right? I mean, you're accountable for yourself and your child. I mean, that's more stressful than if you're on your own or than if you're a couple. And so, you work within your means and you just get it done. And I personally don't look to see, what are the major pitfalls. I look for the cliffs to ensure I don't fall off the cliff, but I don't look for the potholes and stuff like that. I just go.
Yeah,
But part of it is courage. I think part of it is just, again, believing in yourself. And that's where, again, I go back to my parents. I was really lucky. My parents always believed in me. That instilled a great deal of courage, if you wish, or like just
confidence and
confidence
confidence.
and not knowing better to say, I can't do that. My dad would always say, if you want to go and build something, you can build something. You want to re-roof your house, you can do that. If you want to be able to sew, you can do that. You can do whatever you want. My mom was the same way. And so when you have that open sphere to say, hey, you can do whatever, you just need to maybe learn it. That's okay. That's cool. That gives
I
you
think,
the freedom.
and I think people need to, if they're raising young children, really listen to what you said, because my father was always the same way. I think I was meant to be a boy. But anyways, when I always tell this silly story about cupcakes, because when my dad was like building a fence, for example, my friends were making cupcakes. I was building the fence, whereas I'd eat the cupcakes later, but I would
Yeah.
build the fence first. And, I guess, writing my book right now, I realized looking back, because I really don't look back and think, oh, there was one of those moments that I knew I was sort of destined to, do what I love. But when I was in high school, all the girls got shipped off to sewing and home ec, and the boys got to go to Ottawa. I was going to say Ottawa. See, I'm thinking Ottawa, to Otto. And I made a fuss, and I just kept, going down and saying, I want to be transferred to Otto. To me, owning a vehicle was a form of independence. So why wouldn't I want to know how to change the oil, how to do this and that? Anyways, finally, my principal yelled at me and basically said, fine, you go, but and I said, can I just ask you why you won't let me? And he was like, because you're a girl. And I was like, what does that have anything to do with it? I actually got the highest
Exactly.
mark in auto, only because all the guys, all they did was work on the cars. I worked on the cars, but I did the homework too, where they didn't want to do the written part of it. So it was funny. We were just laughing because I ended up getting a higher mark than they did. But it was not because I knew more about cars. It was because I did the homework. But my point to my story is that, my dad never, or my parents never put me in, well, you're a girl, and girls
No.
do that. It was kind of like, oh, you want to do that? You go do you. You want to do this? Sure, you can do it. Like you said, learn, come with me. We'll do this, we'll learn, and that's it. And I think that it's so important for parents to also let their children, regardless of gender, um, figure out what they want and what makes them
Yeah.
happy, right?
Yeah,
Because of
and
course,
give them the latitude, right, to try things and to fail. And I think that's the other thing. If you look at your life and if failure is not an option for you, I think you need to rewrite your story to allow for failure, because failure allows for growth. And
yes,
define what is failure. Failure is just something that didn't work out. Is it a colossal failure? Is it a small failure? Accept them, and you'll live better. You won't have panic attacks. You won't have these issues. Just be kind to yourself to understand that, you may not know, like, we don't know everything. We may master certain things, but we don't know everything. That's why other people are around us, exist to be able to support us. So, understand that you're learning, that you're growing. And you know what? Stuff happens. COVID, as we discussed earlier, COVID happened. I don't think any of us planned for that.
no,
And so,
absolutely not.
was it a failure? Was it just the natural state of being? And did we need to be resilient? Yeah, it was all that, but it wasn't a failure. It's just we
No, and
needed
I
to
don't,
adapt to a new environment.
100%. And when people say, so I know I've used the term failure is not an option, But to me, I know my best lessons, and the most, I'd say, character building happened during those struggles. Hence, like
Mhm.
I said to you, why I tattooed it on my body, the struggle is part of the story. So I don't really know what a failure is, because I know I failed. I know I thought it was going to be this way, but it ended up going this way. So to me, that's not really a failure. To me, that's, you know, rejection is, redirection. So a failure to me is somebody again saying, not this way, or not now, or
Mhm.
try
Mhm.
it this way. So when I say failure is not an option, if I'm looking at my goal, which is here, I will get there. I'll think I'm getting, the straight path, which never happens, or I'm going to go, this path, but then it veers you off that way, which is still going to bring you back to your goal if that's really what you want. So failure not an option. I love that phrase, but yeah, I struggle with it too, because bumps, bruises, obstacles to me are life's way of teaching us, right? And
Yes.
so many people
Yes.
are, oh, I don't want to make a mistake. Why not? Even my kids are like it. I've got one that never failed a course, never, or even like a test, was like just very, very smart when it came to school. The others would get, 50%. They're like, yes, right. And just two opposite. And I'm like, I won't say his name. I'm like, you have to fail a test. You have to not hand something in. And he was like, suck the air out of the room. He's like, I can't. I said, but what will happen? And he's like, I don't know. And we just laughed, right? Because it's like nothing will happen. You'll realize that, you might have, your mark will come down a little bit. This will happen, but nothing will fall apart for you. But
Yeah.
experience those failures. And talking about my kids being in sports, two were goalies, and I'd always put them on the losing team. And as they got older, they're like, why are you doing this to us? I said, because I said, first of all, as a goalie, you need to take as many shots as you can, sort of like life, like bring it, right? You get better and you get better and you get better, but you need to know how to lose. You need to know how to
Yes.
fail. I think that's more important. Like, yes, you can celebrate. And of course, I want you to, win something throughout hockey. Most of the time, it's, best player, because you're giving the most effort in the worst situation, maybe. But, they have to learn. And we had to learn. And we had to learn the hard way, I always say too. Now, we're probably sounding like our parents, but a lot of times the hard lessons we did have to learn the hard way. Right? And I think that that's so
Absolutely.
important. It doesn't matter how old you are, whether you're 5 or 85, I think it's still a lesson.
Mhm.
I
No,
think
I would agree.
I think that the second we stop learning and the second we stop growing, I mean, I think there's only the opposite of that, right?
No,
So
I would agree. Yeah, you
I don't know.
definitely go backwards under those circumstances, right? I mean, I probably believe that at the end of my journey is will be different learning, right? It's just going to be reconfigured in a different way for the different place that I'll be. So I think learning is a part of growing and a part of living. Yeah. I mean, think of like, you know, I started out in my work career where they didn't have personal computers, right? We had portable computers. I was telling somebody the other day, and the analogy of the portable computer was, a screen that was that big, but it weighed 45 pounds.
Oh yeah.
And you had to lug this thing around, be able to put it into your trunk and everything. It was a struggle. I mean, that was a number of years ago, and so much has changed, and now we have more information. We have more power, more information on our cell phones than was computing power even back then. So I mean, you have to learn, you have to adapt. It's part of human nature. So whether you look at the food that you eat, try something new, whether it's taking a different path in terms of your work, whether it's taking a different route to go to where you're going. It's all learning. It's just, what's the scale? But learning is just part of life.
And isn't it a beautiful part of life? I think once you stop learning and being, I mean, learning, some people think, oh, couldn't stand school, right? But for me, learning is growing. When you say learning, I think growing. That to me is what I compute as when somebody says learning, because you can only grow from things that you're exposed to, which
Yeah.
brings me to my next and sadly last question, because you and I are going to do many great things, I hope, together, as well
Absolutely.
as we're going to do, I think, part 2, 3, 4, and 25. Because we won't stop talking. And one of these days we'll meet you and Eddie, and which I will say, he is so kind. Just when he came in, gave you that hug and kiss, what a nice man. And I think you're both very fortunate, because I love you to pieces, but it's just nice to see that there is people out there that are connected and that are in love. So here's my last
Absolutely.
question to you. What was your biggest struggle? And it could be personally or professionally, but
There's
now
been
knowing,
many.
you're like, how many members do we have? But
There's been many. So I'll
oh,
give you one at the
first one.
beginning,
Yeah,
and then I'll give you one at the end.
tell
So
me.
at the beginning of my professional career, we'll keep it at that. I was in an environment where we were in electrical manufacturing, and I was the only female who went into this environment who was not an engineer.
Wow.
And it was really hard to break down the barriers and to be accepted. And back then, and again, this was something that was just brought to my attention this week because I was talking to my son about it. And back then, because I was the only female but not an engineer, blah 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 blah, they used to call me a JAMG, JAMG, so just a mindless girl. And so I found that
Angry face.
first off, it was, sort of,
Mm-hmm.
and just saying, you know what, I'm just going to prove to you what I can do. And so I was very tenacious about getting stuff done. And I was the one who brought ideas to my boss and my boss's boss. And if they asked me for something, I'd say, you know what, have we thought about this? And so it was really destabilizing that myth of the JAMG. So that
I've
was number
never
one.
heard of that word, by the way. And I'm like angry face only because I bet you went in like a ball of fire with all these ideas and all these wonderful things that would have never been in your industry had Rose not arrived. So
Yeah, I mean,
I
part of
celebrate
that
you.
was me, but part of it was also ensuring that I listened to what other people told me, right? So if you're looking at your clients and they'd say, you know what, this really sucks, this really stinks, this really is not any worth. If you start to implement that, or they say, you know what, why is this in this way? And if you can modify it and use it, usually your solutions are not necessarily your brilliant ideas. You're just taking what people have told you to improve upon. So that was number one.
And I'm
And
going to say what you just said too. I just watched a documentary. I won't say right now on who, but they say the people that are the best listeners end up being the best leaders, because what you just said was you took the feedback where some people would try to solve it and talk over it. You took what they said and you somehow either made a solution or made it work. That's brilliant. I love that. So be a good
and,
listener.
and we're individuals, but really where we all rise is when we work together. And so if we collaborate, if we listen, if we create the prototype, whatever it is, and we go back to the people who gave us the information and say, is this what you want? And they'll say, no, tweak this a little bit, tweak that a little bit. It's remarkable what you can do. So there's that. So that was the early one. And then I would say that I've been in the position where I've been given extreme responsibility to unfortunately wind down businesses where the funding was no longer there, the environment for fundraising wasn't there, and you have to help terminate roles and you have to close a business. That is very, very challenging. It's hard on your soul, but it's also hard on the other people because it's very personal, because you're impacting lives. And so I think the other side of it is understanding that you need to do what's right for the people that are being impacted, but you need to do what's right for the organization. If the organization can't succeed because you can't have money, you have to then ensure that whatever wind down you're going to have is going to be done in a manner that is ethical, done with integrity, and is respectful. And so when you do those things, despite the fact that they really suck, And that's the easiest way to say it.
Yeah.
I think then you're doing whatever you can to make the scenario better, but it's still going to be a crappy outcome. And so I think, part of challenge in life is stepping into adversity and saying, okay, I'm
Yeah.
going to do what's right. And I'm a big advocate about doing what's right. And sometimes people don't want to do what's right. And so then you have the clash of the titans, and you have to advocate, prove, explain, provide solutions and everything. You have to dogmatically go after these things so that you get to that end solution.
And
So
what if you don't though? What if you don't get to that solution together? Do you walk? Is that at the point
sometimes,
that's at the
sometimes,
point you have to
sometimes you
walk?
walk, sometimes you look at the scenario and you say, okay, I'm not sleeping at night. And I sleep well. I sleep very, very well. But I'm not sleeping at night because tick, tick, tick goes my brain. And I'm wide awake because I'm agitated about the scenario. And I'm pretty clever by being able to work with people to figure out solutions. So I think that's one of my gifts. And when it
One of the
doesn't
many.
happen, thank you. Much appreciated. Much like you. And so when you look at it in the bigger picture, I think it's really about knowing what the line is for you. What line cannot be crossed? And I won't cross that line. I'll just say, sorry, my door's over there. I'm exiting stage left.
I love that. And you and I, prior to camera rolling, we were talking about healthy boundaries. And I think as we evolve as women and in our lives, we create healthy boundaries. When I was first introduced to healthy boundaries, I was like, I sucked the air out of the room. I said, I can never do that. There's absolutely no way. And, the gal that was coaching me said, okay, again, little steps. Let's say not now. Let's, do
Mhm.
whatever. But it's so funny now. I really have no issue. Before it was like, oh, very apologetic me would be, I'm sorry, maybe I can just donate instead of this, or and I can't give my time, so I'll do. And I felt like physically almost ill because I couldn't, or like I had to peel away the layers. And you have to say no at some point, because like
Yes,
you said, you're either sacrificing yourself and your family, or you're choosing yourself. And now it's so much easier, because I think once you practice something, whether it's like bike riding or roller skating or rollerblading, whatever people do, the more you practice it, the better you get at it. And even though you
absolutely.
feel like you're letting people down, right? Because you and I talked about that. You feel sort
Yeah.
of like you feel like you failed, but you also feel guilty for the person, and then you feel guilty for and it's like, geez, I can't, I don't think a lot of men feel like that. I gotta be honest.
No, I've not seen that happen very often. I
Mm,
have seen it, but I've not seen it often. And I think part of the, yeah,
sometimes they're
sometimes,
able to
sometimes.
separate, I think, what's practical and what's right in their mind. And they can take the feelings out, where we're all like mushy and feely. Is that what you think sometimes women's block can be?
I think it might be that. I think also my experience has been, and this has been validated even currently with some stuff that's been on LinkedIn about women, and there was a blog, and it was about how hard women have to work to get to an equal position and equal pay. And usually it's a 2-to-1 ratio, right? So women work twice as hard to get the same compensation as their peer who works one half. And so I think part of it is that. I think part of it is if you are in an environment where the expectation when you're younger is to be nice, to be kind, to be giving, if that's an expectation, it's really hard to break that. And I think as being a people pleaser, and I've managed to narrow that down a fair bit for me, because I just didn't find it to be effective, and I found it to be counterproductive. So like when you say your first no, it's a lot easier the second time, the third time, the fourth time. And I think also another philosophy that I have is play to your strengths. So don't just do everything that anybody asks you to do. Say, I'm
Right.
sorry, that's not my expertise. However,
Good one.
you may want to go over here. Because why should we have to do everything in the world, right? If we're really great at this, let's focus in on this. It will be less energy for us. It's the stuff we love to do. Okay. Yeah. And even then, if it's the stuff we love to do and we're great at it, we might still say no because we might be tired. We may have had a marathon for something and we just are exhausted. It's okay to say no. And you'll still wake up the next day and you'll be okay.
Exactly. Exactly. And if people can take what you said, bottle it, mimic it, and sort of lead with your heart, lead with kindness, lead with empathy, because nothing you're doing and that I know of in your life, have you ever done out of, anger or bad intentions or malice? It was sort of like, I'm going to go back to what I said is going to be the title is I choose me. You chose your health. You chose your family, you chose the love of your life, and you chose not to be run down. I mean, there is a huge science and statistics behind the age that women have, cardiac issues and either pass or, you know, whatever else that all those things that happen when you have a heart attack are associated with it. And how terrible if we could have chosen ourselves, or we could have chosen to say no, or we could have chosen a different path for ourselves. Thank you
Mhm.
so much for sharing such incredible insight. I learn from you every time I speak with you. I learn
Likewise.
so much. So thank you so much. Big
Thank you.
hug to you. And I look
Great big
forward
hug to you
to
too.
the amazing things we're going to do together. However, we are not going to leave until, aside from being many different things of the same, we both love
Unicorns.
unicorns. Let's see it, baby. Woo! I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Do
So
you
this is the
actually
goofy
wear
side
it?
of me.
Do
Yeah,
you?
sometimes for parties.
I know, for parties. Exactly.
Or
I
when I'm in a
love
goofy mood, which is
exactly.
quite often.
Exactly. And you've got to have that fun and you've got to have that laughter. But, rainbows and unicorns to you forever. I love it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for
Thank you,
sharing.
Adrian. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate you reaching out and giving me the time to share my thoughts. And I hope lots of people get to learn from it. And I look forward to all the great things we're going to do together.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rose.
Take care. Thank you. Enjoy. Have a great day.
Bye.
And to everybody else, have a great one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.